Okay. Take your car. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. We'll start our class in a minute. Wait for. We'll be starting our class in a minute, my friends. So wait for a minute before we go into the class. Because as I am late due to some technical reasons. Okay. We'll start start very shortly in just a minute. So wait for. Yes, friends. Hello, everyone. Welcome to VENKANNA ENGLISHGURU, my friends. So I hope you are fine due to this in this pandemic period, COVID-19. So after a gap of a day, again we are back. Okay. So friends, we are actually talking about age of sensibility today. We are actually in the middle of the neoclassical period. Am I correct or not? So if my voice is clear and you are able to listen properly, show me thumbs up so that I feel confident, so that I'll go further. Come on, friends, quick. So quick, my friends. And if you are able to show thumbs up, then yeah. Yes. So friends, I want to give a small clarification and thanks to Radhika madam, so one of my juniors, and the previously we had a discussion with regard to age of Augustus, where we discussed a novel called Pamela, and the real subtitle is What You Rewarded, not a novel without a hero, and that is actually the subtitle of Vanity Fair. Okay, this is one important correction that you can friend. Again, I'm saying, and I'm a human being that you need to accept. Everybody is a human being. Making mistakes is common. And based on the subject that I've been talking about, maybe with regard to the dates, maybe there are 1% of fluctuations. 99.99 percentage, the points that I'm giving you, delivering you, and 100% is it will give you a lot of stuff. Maybe because of my time constraints, because of my time schedule, because of my two kids, and the way they give me trouble. So maybe certain tensions, I may make certain mistakes. I don't do that, but 0.001 percentage there are chances. That's what I've been talking about. So if there are, definitely I'm here to correct, because uh, it's very important, because I'm giving you information for your examinations. So if there are any mistakes, maybe I don't think that it's been for more than 40 classes I have taken, maybe one simple correction like a novel without a hero. No, that is actually the subtitle of Vanity Fair. And Pamela, the right subtitle is What You Rewards it. And you do remember based on my previous class. Okay. So we are into the important class today, and our important class is Age of Sensibility. Yes. Actually, I thought of asking you a few questions because of some technical errors. Of my laptop. I could not start the class in time at 10, at exactly 9. Yes, I could not do that. Yes. So, a very warm good evening to everyone. So, now we are into our subject. So, we are actually in the middle of neoclassical, the period from 1660 to 1798. This is considered to be the neoclassical age, and where we discussed 1660 to 1700. This is Restoration age, age of Dryden, and we also discussed the second period and age of Augustus or age of Pope, the period from 1700 to 1745, and the third period, age of Johnson, age of sensibility, 1745 to 1785 or 98. This is what we are going to talk about in our today's discussion. See, and the period from 1745 to 1798, the age of sensibility, the period from 1745 to 85, because 84, death of Dr. Johnson, death of Samuel Johnson, and this is also called the greatest age of Johnson. Yes, friends, see, and during this period you could find plenty of important novelists like Samuel Johnson, who is also called Dr. Johnson, and the first lexicographer, the first person who produced first Oxford English Dictionary in 1755. This is the major important contribution made by Dr. Johnson, and is also known for Lives of English Poets, where he composed the biographies of poets, starting from Chaucer to Thomas Gray. And Oliver Goldsmith, a very popular, important novelist, a very important critic, and is popularly known for. He was an Irish writer, Irish novelist. Edmund Burke, Edmund Spencer, and Jonathan Swift, Oliver Goldsmith. All these are Irish writers. They are all from Ireland. Remember, you may also get a bit. Who of the following is an Irish writer? Remember, Edmund Spencer, like Jonathan Swift, and R.B. Sheridan and Oliver Goldsmith, popular Irish writers. Edmund Burke, very popularly known for his critical essays, and James Boswell. James Boswell and Samuel Johnson were close friends, and James Boswell was the important writer who composed the biography of Samuel Johnson, Life of Johnson. It's a popular text written by James Boswell in 1784. Next, Edward Gibbon and Esther Lynch Thaler, popular writers. Next, this is also the period of great novelists. And who are the greatest novelists like during this period? Samuel Richardson, who is very popular for two important novels, Pamela and Clarissa. Both are examples for psychological novels. Both are examples for epistolary novels, as I told you. And Henry Fielding, very important. Henry Fielding and Tobias Smollett and Lawrence Stern. And he composed a very popular book called Tristram Shandy. And how many volumes are there in that? That repeated several times in the history of net. Next, Henry Fielding, Shamella, you need to know. And as I told you, Samuel Richardson and Henry Fielding, they were rivals like and Alexander Pope and Joseph Edison. Okay, like next, represented a finale of literary and critical modes of neoclassicism, the worldview of enlightenment, the concept of enlightenment, which is proposed by John Locke. And this is considered to be the last stage of the writers who implemented the ideas of neoclassicism. What is neoclassicism? I told you a lot. Actually, I thought of going, we should have an online quiz on uh, entire period. Maybe we'll see. Okay, this is what some important concepts with regard to the life of Johnson. The age of sensibility. What does it mean by sensibility? That we need to understand. Sensibility. Today you see, and a lot of people and who are not sensible. So people who have a lot of sensibility, they are able to survive today. So sensibility, which means, what does it mean by it? You can see sensibility puts its stress on emergence. Sorry, it gives a lot of priority for emergence. In other words, writers of the 1740s new cultural attitudes and theories of literature and types of poetry. So emergence, what is required? According to neoclassicism, you have to write literature that is only, and that usually provides a lot of pleasure and instruction or correction. of the manners. But these people, they, apart from that, they understood what are the emergent ideas, emergent needs of the people, and those were addressed. And what were the new cultural attitudes of the people, apart from giving priority to the uh, classical principles, classical ideas. And because neoclassicism is nothing but only imitating the traditionalism, imitating what was already said by experts, by the classical writers according to this. But apart from that, during this period, these writers, apart from giving importance to traditionalism, they also wrote literature that was more important on the current needs. This is exactly opposite to neoclassicism, but they were able to use. That is what sensibility. And theories of literature, types of literature. According to neoclassicism, only they are required to write satires, elegies, pastoral elegies. But these writers, they changed the concepts. That is what sensibility. For example, I will give you very one practical example with regard to sensibility. For example, I believe in religion. So, for example, I was forced to stay in some other religion. Then what do? I respect that religion. I live with those people, and I also enjoy, love being a part of that particular culture. So, because I at the time I feel I use a lot of sensibility rather than giving priority to only my own religion. That can be a kind of sensible thinking. A growing sympathy for the Middle Ages. So, apart from giving, what is sensibility? According to this age of sensibility, the process of giving importance to not only to the classical themes, ideas, styles, and these writers, they also gave priority to a sympathy towards Middle Ages, sympathy towards 12th century, 15th century, 14th century, and Dark Ages, and vogue of cultural primitivism. So, nativism, native tribes. Next, an awakening interest in ballads and other folk literature that was also given a lot of priority during this period. So, according to neoclassical writers, only unity emphasizes a lot of heroic couplets and heroic stanzas. But apart from that, they also started using writing literature on other genres, other styles. That is what sensibility. A turn from neoclassic correctness and its emphasis on judgment. So, according to neoclassical, where literature should be always to correct the manners of the people, to correct the manners of the society, to correct the manners, the faults and foibles of the society. But there was a shift from this. That is what sensibility, emphasis on judgment. Not just literature should not be always written only for judgment. No, not possible. Sometimes literature is to be written for your own sake. Sometimes literature and is to be written for yourself, not for only for judgment, judging the values, judging the beliefs, judging the society, judging people. No. And literature, sometimes it can also be written about something else beyond that. So during this period, literature was away from correctness, was away from judging the beliefs, judging the values of the people. A restraint to an emphasis on instinct and feeling. This is the major important contribution as a part of sensibility. So during on judgment, they gave a lot of importance to their own instincts, what they felt, what they thought, not what was already instructed by the classical writers. No. And what they felt and what were their feelings. So literature was towards the personal feelings of the poets, the personal emotions of the poets, the instinctive feelings of the writers, rather than giving priority to the society, rather than giving priority to the human beings in a culture, human beings in a society, or giving priority or being guided by the traditional experts. No, they were away from the particular tradition. That is what this is, the age of sensibility. Next, feeling and the development of literature for sensibility. This is what the actual term that is related to. So that is why we can say the writers who lived during this period are considered to be the pre-romantic writers. Which means what the ideas that were mainly emphasized by romantic writers, and these writers became forerunners. the first runners who spoke about, who introduced the ideas of romanticism at the beginning. That is why some of the writers from this period are considered to be pre-romantic poets. Poets like William Blake, Robert Burns, and Oliver Goldsmith, and William and Jim Thompson and William Cowper. All these are considered to be pre-romantic writers who become a part of this. Next, original genius. Instead of traditional genius, instead of imitating what is already said, and they gave priority to the originality of the poet, the instinctive feelings, instinctive emotions of the poet, rather than and just judging the manners of the people. And bardic poetry of the sublime, the process of having sublimity, one simple word, having great thinking, great action, grand thought about the world. For example, grand thought. If I take class and for you, I would charge, for example, 10K or 20K. And if you come for online or offline classes, but what I have been taking here, simply I spend more than and 3.5 lakhs, and I'm taking classes for you and free of cost. And this can be, I can say, a kind of sublimity, a grand thought, and which will be useful to some of the students. If one student out of these classes who've been watching, if one student qualifies net, and if he sends a message, sir, because of watching your classes I qualified set, that is going to be sublimity, thought, great idea, great thought, great action. So this is what a concept which was first introduced by Longinus in the book on the sublimity, on the sublime, and very coined later, and John Keats who reused that word. And I'll talk about as a part of when I talk about John Keats and visionary imagination. So the concept of sensibility emphasizes on inner feelings and instinctive, natural, the ideas that come out from you, not that are controlled by society, no, that are controlled by human beings, no, and the thoughts that come out from your mind, come out from your own perception and your own. Why do they come out? Nobody knows. It is only subjectivity of the poet, and sublimity and visionary imagination. All these are the components that fit into sublimity and sensibility, my friends. Next, you can see Thomas Gray, one of the major important poets during this period, who expressed this anti-neoclassic sensibility. The first person who talks about this is Thomas Gray. And set of values in a stanzas to Mr. Bentley, a popular book where, and this book talks about the importance of sensibility, importance of feeling, importance of and and primitive imagination of the poet rather than control and following traditionalism in the process of composing poetry. Other poets who showed similar shifts and thought and taste were William Collins, Joseph and Thomas Warton, Christopher Smart, William Cowper, and Thomas Percy published his influential Relics of Ancient English Poetry. This is very, very important, my friends. Relics of Ancient English Poetry, where Thomas Percy talks about the importance of sensibility in this, and included many folk ballads and medieval metrical romances in this. Thomas Percy's Relics of Ancient English Poetry, where he spoke about, rather than imitating the traditionalism, the ideas that were already exposed by different writers like Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, Longinus, Horace, or Homer, or Ovid, or plenty of other writers. And he wrote about literature mainly based on the medieval ages, based on his own inner feelings. That is what sensibility. Next, friends, you can see, and this is somewhat theoretical concepts. I hope you always remember. Next, during this period, we have a wonderful group. This is called transitional poets. Transition, which means change. And what kind of change that you can find? Change from neoclassical to romanticism. The process of writing, composing literature from the by following different rules, by following decorum principles, and it leads to and naturalism, it leads to imagination, it leads to fancy, it leads to and pantheism or etc. So that is what these are the writers, transitional poets, who converted the concepts of neoclassicism into romanticism. That's why these poets are particularly they are called the pre-romantic poets. Remember, my friends. So romantic poets they usually exhibit a lot of ideas about romantic poetry, but these writers and became a source for romantic writers and for writing naturalistic kind of poetry, innovative kind of poetry, rather than simply imitating and the principles, the ideas, the thoughts that were already produced by the classical writers more than 17 or 1800 centuries ago. Next, the romantic qualities of these poets. These poets believe in what Victor Hugo. Friends, this is very important. Several times this definition was asked. Very, 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 very important. This definition was given by Victor Hugo. What is romanticism? Liberalism in literature. Freedom. So the process of composing literature, you will have a lot of freedom. But according to neoclassical, according to Pope, according to Dryden, your literature should be always controlled. There is no liberalism at all. Only we need to imitate the traditionalism. There is no innovation at all. But these transitional poets, and they believed in the principle that is given by Victor Hugo. What is that? Liberalism in literature. So they believed that in the process of composing poetry, you have a lot of liberalism. You have a lot of freedom to choose the subject, to select the content, to select the theme or anything else. They are not much worried about the rules and conventions. No. So this is what the major rule of romanticism, but this is first exhibited by the transitional poets. All the transitional poets, they did not give any priority to the importance to rules and conventions of composing poetry. But according to neoclassicism, they have to follow rules, they have to follow conventions. If you want to be a good writer, you need to follow Uri couplet. If you are not, you are considered a menial poet, according to Pope, according to majority of neoclassical poets. And they believe in individual poetic inspiration. So, in the process of writing poetry, and what is majorly required, your inspiration is required, intrinsic motivation is required rather than extrinsic motivation. According to neoclassical, art is for humanity's sake, but according to transitional, art is for the poet's sake. If you are inspired and if you are internally motivated, you can write poetry according to transitional poets. And their poetry is in content and treatment and passion, emotion, imagination, or and their poetry is in content. So they believed that what they are going to talk about, this is very important, and not the whether it is going to be useful to the society, whether it is going to be judgmental. No, they did not give any priority to that. Their intention, their major intention was only in the content, what they are going to exhibit, and they are not going to give priority to how is it going to influence the society. They did not give any priority. But according to neoclassical, whatever you write, your literature should be always useful, should be always addressed to the society and addressed to the culture, addressed to your nation. If it is not, you are not permitted to write literature according to neoclassical. But they violated. They believed that they wanted and having a lot of happiness for themselves, not to the society. For example, I'll give you one of the best important producers, important directors of Indian cinema, Ram Gopal Verma. You can see, and he produces today a lot of movies for his own satisfaction, not for the not to give any satisfaction to the audience. You can see today, and the kind of programs, the kind of movies that he produces, not commercial, for his own happiness, for his own content. And he directly says, who asked you to watch my movies? I produced the movie for my sake, for my own content, not for you. Like that, during this period, poets wrote a lot of literature for their own happiness, not to help the society. Next, their poetry is in content and treatment, and passion became a major important passion, emotion, and imagination. Not values, cultural values, social values, sophisticated values, orthodox, changing, correcting the manners of the sophisticated people. No. They did not give any priority to that. Their words, their ideas were only on and promoting their own passion, their own emotions, their own imagination. For example, once you read the poetry of William Blake, once you read the poetry of William Cowper, James Thompson, they wrote about only themselves, what they thought about, not that is not addressed to the society. Next, valued by them about the cold light of intellectuality, not intellectuality, and not required. Next, friends, we'll go to the next slide. They naturally return to the lyric. This is very important. They wrote a lot of literature. That lyric, what does it mean by lyric? I told you a lot. What is lyric? Characteristics of lyric and types of lyric. Lyric, the emotions, feelings, and personal thoughts of the poet himself, and it is not going to address the society. And it is just like personal feelings, pastoral feelings, love feelings of the poet himself. It's all about the music of the poet, and he thinks about something and he writes. That's what these poets, and one of the major important vehicles and means of writing poetry was only lyrics. And I told you what is lyric and types. They have a love of the wild, fantastic, abnormal, and supernatural. They wrote literature about wild issues, not the socially useful and socially productive kind of use and subjects, no, and abnormal kind of issues and supernatural issues that they felt. They show a new appreciation of the world of nature, and they created their own style. Their poetry is no longer drawing room poetry, not drawing room poetry where it is going to correct the manners of the people, where it is going to address a society, where it is going to expose the problems of a society or a culture or a nation or a class. No, drawing room comedies and talking about the problems of middle class, poor class, sophisticated people. No. Next, it's a not drawing room poetry. They do not limit their attention to urbane life. But when we talk about neoclassical poetry, neoclassical literature, a lot of urbanity, sophisticated characters, orthodox communities, they become a part. But here, not urban life and manners only, not urban life, urban manners, as comedy of manners, as restoration dramatists did, and Pope almost always did. They place more importance on the individual. Whenever you talk about lyric and you talk about the individual perceptions of the poet, that's it, not about the society. Which means you need to understand the process of writing poetry from art from humanity's sake to heart, heart from the poet's sake, hearts from the individual's sake. This is the major slogan of these writers. So you can see on the individual, what does it mean by individual? The poet's sake. Art is for the poet's sake, not for the society's sake. That is what. So how it is actually traveling towards. What is the slogan? My friends, as I told you, it is impossible to read 100 poems, and it is very difficult to read. If you read at least 200 poems, and you will definitely qualify JRF, frankly speaking. And how many poems that you can find? Many important poems in this, and you could find very, very important poems like more than 1,000 poems. Is it possible for you to, for anyone to read 1,000 poems or 200 or 300 novels or 100 plays? And if you are seriously preparing for NET examination, it is impossible. Then how can you guess the theme of the particular drama composed during neoclassical, composed during romantic, based on these types of characteristics? If you are good at understanding the poetry, understanding drama, understanding novel, understanding the major characteristics of a period, definitely you will be able to guess what could be the theme of the poem composed during neoclassical, composed during age of sensibility, composed during pre-romanticism, composed during restoration. You have a lot of chance, friends, as I told you. So it is very difficult, I can say. It's very difficult to cover the whole syllabus, and our life will not be sufficient for us to read 200 poems or 100 novels, 100 short stories, or 200 novels. Very difficult. And don't think that I read more than 100 novels. No, hardly I have gone through below 50 novels. Still, but how come? And I was able to qualify a junior research fellowship long back, more than 9 years ago. Only unit 33 percentage memory, 33 percentage. How you infer, how you predict, how you guess, how you make use of these features when you read certain novels in the examination, so that you will guess the theme of this text easily. That's what I'm trying to say. Why many of the students are not able to qualify NET or SET or JRF in English literature? Because if you run after different novels, different short stories, different poem, it's very difficult. And focus on the basic ideas. If you are thorough with that, and if you read some repeated ones, it's very easy in a short period. Okay, these are some of the major important characteristic features of transitional poetry. Next, friends, a stronger democratic spirit. These writers, these transitional writers, poets, and sensible age of sensibility, during this age of sensibility, these writers exhibited a kind of democratic kind of spirit rather than aristocratic, where you are ordered to write poetry only about the society. Rather than, you have freedom to select the subject that you like, that you feel, that you imagine, that you have a lot of passion, and a greater concern for the oppressed and the poor people. But whereas neoclassical writers, literature was about sophisticated people, orthodox communities and their problems. What about the common people? What about the oppressed, downtrodden communities who are going to talk about their problems? Hence, these writers, these poets focused on writing literature on the poor communities, oppressed communities, downtrodden communities in different hamlets. A greater emphasis on individualism in poetry. Different writers, they have selected their own style of composing poetry. Individualism in poetry, society, everywhere, though subjectivity, this is what very important. Neoclassical poetry is neoclassical literature. It's all about, it emphasizes that literature should be always objective, where your personal feelings are not to be exposed. But transitional poetry, but romantic poetry, it's all about subjectivity, your own personal feelings, your own personal emotions, and what you feel can be the best poetry. Not the poetry that is written about the society, the poetry that is written by the written about the society, that is written about the sophisticated people in a society or in a culture, in a nation. No. And it's about yourself, it's about your personal feelings, and you will have a lot of partiality to talk about, and subjectivity, showing the personal bias, because I felt, hence I wrote. That is my own subjectivity. That is why during this period, age of sensibility, literature was influenced by the subjectivity of the poet. Next, lastly, there is a strong reaction against heroic couplet. Very important. How do you, so for example, when somebody says, and you need to, if you write only in heroic couplet, you are called the greatest poet. If you say that, and who are going to use heroic couplet? Very difficult. So there was this transitional poetry which is against heroic couplet, against the process of using decorum and following certain principles in the process of composing poetry. No, you should not. Next, the only eligible words with words unit. They make experiments. Yes, the process of making a number of experiments in terms of composing poetry, in terms of stanza, in terms of rhyme scheme, in terms of rhythm. These are required to be brought. Hence, and transitional poets, they followed innovation rather than traditionalism in terms of techniques, experiments with new measures, new stanza forms. Okay, these are the major important points with regard to transitional poetry, my friends. Next, you can see who are the important transitional poets. Friends, this was asked several times, and you need to be careful about Oliver Goldsmith, William Blake, and William Cowper, George Crabbe, Jem Thompson. Main writers, these five. So, Oliver Goldsmith, William Blake, and William Cowper, George Crabbe, Jem Thompson. And major, who are the leaders of this transitional poetry who exhibited strong opposition against neoclassicism and supported for the move of Romanticism, who are mainly called the pre-romantic poets. This is very important, my friends. And William Blake, one is William Blake, and the second one is Oliver Goldsmith. These are very, very, very important poets. One is William Blake, and second one is Oliver Goldsmith. Songs of innocence, songs of experience, best examples for transitional poetry, where you might have read as part of your B or MA. Next, apart from you, all these are the major important poets, and these are you required to read: Thomas Percy and Thomas Chatterton, James Macpherson, Thomas Gray, William Collins, Robert Burns. Another important writer is Robert Burns. These three you can remember: Robert Burns, William Blake, Oliver Goldsmith, and the only two, Robert Burns and William Blake. Very, very important, these two. Only two, Robert Burns and William Blake. Okay, friends, you have to remember this. Okay. So this is what I wanted to talk about in our today's discussion, and we'll be talking about and the major historical incidents and events, major important dates with regard to this. There are nearly 30 plus dates, and as a part of this, we'll talk about them in our next class. See you, and we'll meet tomorrow. And before you leave, like our video and share our videos to your friends and classmates, and be a part of their achievement, their success. Okay, friends, we'll meet. Okay, right, guys, we'll meet tomorrow, same time.